This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
If we knew more about our sleep, what would we do differently? Would we go to bed at a consistent time or take steps to reduce interruptions to our sleep? With the all-new Sleep Score, Apple Watch measures your bedtime consistency, interruptions, and sleep duration. Then, every morning it combines these factors into an easy-to-understand score from 1 to 100. So you'll know how to take the quality of your sleep from good to excellent. Introducing the new Sleep Score on Apple Watch. iPhone 11 or later required.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk,
what's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome back to the podcast. Look, Saturday's coming. It's not just another Saturday, not just another game. This is not a rivalry footnote or even just senior day. The final week of the regular season is upon us. And for Oklahoma, look, it's not coming with nostalgia. It's coming with consequence. Oklahoma is not walking into this weekend hoping just to finish strong. They're walking into this weekend standing literally on the edge of history. Sooners right now with 9 wins, 2 losses, 5 wins in the SEC. And this is the one game that could change everything. LSU coming to Norman Saturday afternoon, 2:30 kickoff. It's not a favor. It's not a formality. The Tigers are a force that can either validate everything Oklahoma has built or they can make the Sooners wait another year to prove it. Oklahoma enters the weekend ranked number 8 in the college football playoff rankings. And if you understand how all this works, then you understand that number is not just decorative. It is directional because Oklahoma doesn't need help. They don't need chaos. They don't need somebody else to fail. All they need to do is take care of what's directly in front of them. Win this game. If Oklahoma does that, they are almost certainly in the college football playoff. Just win this game. It's not you may just be in the playoff. It is you're hosting. You're hosting a playoff game in Norman in December right here in SEC country. That's historical. That's the first time ever. And it wasn't supposed to happen this fast for Brent Venables and the Sooners. Think back just to August. Think back to these postseason narratives that were there. Can Oklahoma survive year 2 in the SEC? Is this Brent Venables last year? Would this transition take years for the Sooners? Is the defense real? Is Venables the right man? Is the offense sustainable? And not one of those questions is being whispered right now. In fact, they're all being answered. They have been answered. And they're being answered with the product on the field. This isn't survival mode anymore for the Sooners. This is arrival mode. Oklahoma comes into the final weekend on a 3-game winning streak. Not just a 3-game winning streak, but a 3-game winning streak over ranked opponents. 3 ranked wins, 3 different styles of opponents, 3 different messages. Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri. Those 3 teams, those 3 moments all come back to one identity that's being formed here at the University of Oklahoma. The Tennessee win, that game was about resilience. Alabama, that game's about belief. Missouri, that win was about maturity. And when your program starts stacking wins that all look different, that means something is changing inside the building. That's when a team stops being emotional and starts being executable, right? Can I use that word? Or did I just invent one? Brent Venables said it plainly earlier this week. If you saw his press conference quotes, he says, look, going into our last regular season game here at home, we all know what's on the line. Nothing is going to sneak up on Oklahoma on Saturday. Not just talking about the scoreboard, the program, the future, even perception. And Venables wasn't shy about what he wants from the fans. We've got to do our part as Sooner Nation. He wants to make it, quote, an amazing day. Home field advantage can make things really difficult for them, talking about LSU offensively. Translation, what he's saying is this: Norman matters. You as the crowd, you matter. The noise, it matters. LSU needs to walk into a stadium that feels hostile from the opening kickoff all the way to the post-game traffic. Because I've said it. I've said it before. I've said it on multiple podcasts. When we do our SEC power rankings. I even said it earlier today on the first podcast we recorded about LSU. They scare me. And maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm just naive. Maybe I'm just paranoid. But the Tigers do scare me. Because this is not a team that's dead. I do believe this is a dangerous football team. Now, they're not the monster LSU teams that we've seen in the past, but I do believe that they are absolutely capable of storming Norman. I think they can make the weekend painful for Oklahoma. Going back, after Brian Kelly was dismissed back in October, things changed with this program. Frank Wilson steps in, and suddenly you've got a wounded locker room that's starting to find direction. The Tigers are 2-1 under Wilson. You got back-to-back wins. You're getting a little bit of momentum coming back. You get a little bit of pride restored. And teams are dangerous when they have been embarrassed. And then when they finally get a reason to believe again, they become even more so. And Venables knows that. He said, his words, not me quoting something else. And these are his words. He said LSU is as talented as a roster as they have faced this season. And when Brent Venables says that, it's not politeness. I believe it's respect. So this team is loaded. They're loaded with SEC caliber athletes. They've got size, they've got speed, they've got violence from top to bottom. So Saturday, look, this is LSU's first ever visit to Norman. So that makes things pretty interesting, but also I believe dangerous. Because historically, LSU has had Oklahoma's number. 3 wins to 1, and I think that last game, what was it, Baton Rouge last year, that stings. That smolders still. And I think it still lives somewhere in that locker room there in Norman. But I know, Brent Venables knows, LSU knows, that this is not the same team that went to Baton Rouge in 2024. Not even close. Brent Venables doesn't deny culture. He preaches it. But he doesn't do it with hype. If you look at what he does it with evidence. And he said something this week that really just it grabbed my attention. And I think I love this quote. And I think it's something that really kind of should be hung around when we're talking about this team, regardless of what happens on Saturday. Brent says this: everybody sees success, but they don't see what I'm talking about behind closed doors. Then he says this: the root system has been growing for the last few years. The root system, not just the foundation, but what is under the foundation of this program. That is not recruiting language. That's construction language. That's what you say when you know that you have laid the foundation. It's not experimenting and then, throw things up on the wall, see if they stick, and then give it a name. The name that he uses, the name that he gives his program is Relentless. Now, that's not a tagline. That's a reality. And he named names. Not stars, not workers, not leaders, quiet grinders, men who didn't transfer, guys in his program who don't flinch, they don't fold, guys who built this season in failure before they built it on highlight reels. And then he goes on to say this: the fruit is the last thing that you see on a tree. Man, I love that. The fruit is the last thing that you see on a tree, meaning that you don't measure culture in November until you've invested in it back in February. This is not a team that Brent Venables and his staff have built on noise. This is a team that's now built on repetition. And Saturday, it's going to be the test of whether the foundation holds. when the stakes are high. Now, let's talk defense for just a second. Because nothing about this Oklahoma football team works unless the defense works. I mean, period. If the defense isn't doing its job, nothing's going to go right. And Venables took over play calling responsibilities. And when he asked about it this week, he didn't duck it. He owned it. He said, there's not another person in this building I want carrying this weight but me. There's no delegation here. This is ownership. This is accountability. And you look at the results, right? We've talked about this both in print on the website and here on the podcast. Missouri entered last weekend with the nation's leading rusher, and Oklahoma held him to 57 yards. The Tigers reached the red zone 4 times, but they only scored 6 points. And I love the stats after the first quarter against Missouri. 12 rushing yards. Through the second, third, and fourth quarters, a total of 12 rushing yards. That is not luck, guys. That is structure. That is preparation. That is dominance. That is an identity defense. And Venables made something else clear, that this isn't solo work. This is a staff-wide obsession. They're together for 10 hours a day at film, evaluation, correction, detail. There are no egos. There's no one flying solo here, just alignment. And I think, once you get away from the defense, the next biggest talking point when we're talking about this program in preparation for Saturday is at the quarterback position. Because I don't believe there's a lot of middle ground with John Mateer. I think there's people who are on board with John Mateer, and there's people who are not on board with John Mateer. I think there's no one that's left in the holding pattern. But I'm on board. Is he Sam Bradford? Nope. Jalen Hurts? Nope. Definitely not Baker Mayfield. But he's a winner. And he's not going to win the awards that those guys won, but he's winning games. And I think Venables said it best. He's an alpha. He runs towards responsibility. He doesn't run away from it. He doesn't carry pressure like it's a burden. He carries it like a weapon. And what we've seen him transition to where he's not forcing things. He's protecting the ball now. He's still extending plays. He's still converting in chaos. But what we have seen since the injury is that when the game is tight, he knows how to breathe. That's leadership. It's not volume, it's presence. And then you look at what's happening on the special teams side of the ball. I did not think special teams is going to be as big of a deal as it was. I thought it'd be better, but dang, Tate Sandell, Lou Groh's a finalist. I told you I was going to vote for him. He was on my top 3, and he made it. This guy's the real deal. There's not a lot of kickers that have come through this far into the season that you could put the automatic label next to, but he's definitely one of them. And when you talk about clutch, when you talk about calmness, he embodies all of that. Dude's not just a specialist; he is a weapon. And Venables said that he has a big voice. And that's not just about kicking; that's about commanding. And when we're looking at the possibility, the very real possibility of December football, field position is power. Momentum swings, hidden yards matter. And special teams, they decide seasons. They decide playoff wins. You know that. Oklahoma knows that. And Tate Sandell is a powerful weapon that they have in their arsenal. One more thing that Brent Venables talked about leading up to this game is that Saturday is senior day. And this is the first class that Brent Venables had. He inherited some of these guys. He's the first guys to buy in. If you use the cliche, these are the first guys to bleed for Brent Venables, the first ones to endure. And he said it. He called them family. and you don't let family walk out quietly. I think emotion will be loud on Saturday. But what they can't do is let that turn into chaos. LSU has a punch. Mike Van Buren can generate offense. He can throw, he can run, he can break containment. So the Tigers have an electric return game as well. They've got athleticism along the lines. So this isn't like an injured animal ready to roll over. I think you could describe him more as a wounded one that's going to fight with its teeth. And that's exactly why, going back to the top of the segment, Saturday matters. Back in August, Oklahoma was a question mark. Now we're nearing the end of November, and they are an answer. They're standing on the edge of validation. Not a title, not a parade, no confetti, but confirmation. And a win over LSU, it doesn't guarantee championships in the future, but it does guarantee access right now. Access to legitimacy, access to opportunity, access to national conversation. This is not about belonging in the SEC anymore. That argument, that's over. That is done with. This is about belonging at the table where trophies live. And Brent Venables said it plainly. Stay humble, stay hungry, stay dangerous. And if this program is what it believes it is, Saturday will not be emotional. It will be controlled. It will be loud. It will be lethal. Because Oklahoma didn't build this season to look good. They built it to last. No margin, no mercy, no fear, no flashy, no loud, no just relentless. And Saturday, well, we'll find out if that's enough to carry them into the postseason and host the first football game, college football playoff game ever in Norman. All right, so let's lock in now, Sooner Nation, because like we said, this was a game that matters. Not just another game on the schedule. This is not just senior day, not just a LSU coming to town for the first time. This is a collision of styles. This is identity versus desperation. This is Brent Venables, Oklahoma built brick by brick, taking on an LSU team trying to survive a season that never quite became what it was supposed to be. So let's talk about what this game really is and what it is not. This is not Oklahoma trying to beat LSU at LSU's game. This is Oklahoma forcing LSU into Oklahoma's world. And when you start breaking down the numbers, the matchups, the psychology, and the moment, you begin to see, I think, something very clearly. LSU does not match Oklahoma where this game is going to be decided. Let's start with the Tigers. So LSU rolls into Norman with a 7-4 record, just scraped by Western Kentucky last week, 13-10. I mean, that's not exactly a thunderous arrival. So in that game, LSU ran 79 plays for 328 total yards. Again, not explosiveness, that's survival. The ground game, well, Western Kentucky held LSU to 3.4 yards per carry. Now, you compare that to Oklahoma's defense. We're going to get there in a second, okay? LSU's season numbers paint a team struggling to find identity on offense. And you know how much we've talked about identity on this podcast. But the Tigers, just 22.6 points per game, 17 passing touchdowns, 9 rushing touchdowns. They're ranked 123rd nationally in rushing. So let that sink in for just a second. LSU, the program famous for elite running backs, speed, power. It's one of the weakest rushing teams in the entire country this season. They average 108 yards rushing per game. And now they walk into a stadium to face the 6th best scoring defense in America. This is not a recipe. This is not a matchup. This is what it is this is a warning label. Now let's talk about the Sooners. On the defensive side of the ball, Oklahoma's given up 14 points per game. 14. That's not a good defense. That is a suffocating defense. And they're not doing it by accident. 81 rushing yards allowed per game. Only 6 rushing touchdowns all season long. 8 passing touchdowns allowed this season. And look at the balance. I mean, do you realize what we're talking about here when we're talking about balanced defense? You can't run on them, you can't throw on them, and you can't survive mistakes that you make against them. And now LSU comes in with a struggling rushing attack, a quarterback that can flash, but it's not consistent, and an offense that's not cracked 14 points against a defense like Oklahoma's all season long. If LSU can't run, they can't shorten the game. And if they can't shorten the game, they have to throw. And throwing against Oklahoma is where drives go to die. So now, we typically like to zoom out, right? We like to zoom out here, but this time we're going to zoom in. Let's zoom in and let's focus on the trenches. The last game, LSU gave up 22 rushing yards on 24 attempts. Now, that's less than 1 yard per carry, 0.9. Their front seven fought. Now, you got to respect that. But now they're going to face an Oklahoma offensive line that has slowly found its identity. Oklahoma does not overwhelm teams, but they do wear them down. What they do is they can get in and they just kind of lean on the defensive fronts. And what that does is it makes the fourth quarter feel heavier. If you're the defense, right? That fourth quarter, it feels heavier than what the scoreboard may show. This is not an offense that's built to impress, right? You're not going to see a lot of social media flash on this, but it is built to win possessions. And Saturday, that's going to matter because this game is not about splash, it's about strain. Now, here's where I believe the game tilts. LSU has given away the football 12 times this season. Oklahoma, 13 turnovers across 11 games. But here's the difference. What Oklahoma's defense does is it creates chaos. So yeah, they've got interceptions because they force bad throws. They bait quarterbacks into panic decisions. And LSU has manageable discipline, but Oklahoma thrives on suffocation. Not blitzing wildly, not gambling, just boxing you in until you break. And this is in Norman. If LSU breaks, this stadium will bury them. And we talked about Tate Sandell for just a little bit in that opening segment. But let's talk about the little stuff here. Not saying Tate Sandell's little, but, special teams, right? Oklahoma's winning the invisible game across the season. What I'm talking about is they're winning field position. They're winning kick coverage. They're winning the kicking. They're winning, the way they return the ball. But LSU they do have explosive potential. But one thing that they also do is they leak yardage with penalties. They've been flagged this season 78 times for 651 penalty yards. That's not an edge, that's noise. Now, Oklahoma, not great in the penalty department, but I do think the Sooners are more disciplined and they have the advantage of this being at home. So maybe you could say Oklahoma's more aligned, and against a defense this strong, detrimental mistakes turn fatal. So let's say this clearly. I don't think this game will be high scoring. I think if LSU wins, if they are able to pull off the upset, I think it's going to be ugly. I think if Oklahoma wins, it's going to be methodical. Teaser here. Stay tuned for the final segment. I'll give you my score prediction. But this game, it's not about style. I think this game is about survival. And Oklahoma has lived right here in this moment. So we talked about John Mateer. Let's bring him back up, right? Because we got a quarterback that doesn't dazzle with the movie style numbers. Not going to make a lot of ESPN highlights. But here's what he does better than I think a lot of quarterbacks in the country. We talked about how he's protecting the ball. But we don't talk enough about his late game plays that he makes. We don't talk enough, I don't believe, about how he handles pressure, how he converts on third down, and how he gets them into the right play. Now, every quarterback makes mistakes. Every quarterback has their limitations, and John Mateer certainly has his. But man, he sure does a lot right that we don't talk about. And you've got an LSU defense that I believe is loaded with talent, but I think it's also vulnerable to precision. So John Mateer doesn't need heroics. He just needs to be efficient. And he's proven that he can do that. So if Oklahoma wins this game, I don't believe it's going to be on one highlight throw or highlight run. I think it's going to be on stalled LSU drives. I think it's going to be on short fields they create with defense. I think it's going to be, stopping, putting the Tigers behind the chains and stopping them on 3rd and 8. I think it's going to be like fourth quarter possessions where they just eat the Tiger offense alive. I think that's what this game is going to bleed. I think Oklahoma is built for those battle, grinded out, physical type of games. But we're remiss if we don't say this, because I think there's just this era of aura, I guess, of arrogance for Oklahoma amongst the fan base. That you just think you kind of run out here on the field, you put your helmet down, and you win automatically based off logos and how the season's gone. But I have said for weeks now that I'm worried about this LSU game because this is a dangerous team. I think really any team in this conference can be dangerous. But LSU, they've got speed, they've got playmakers, and they've got nothing to lose. Now, here's the difference. They're trying to survive. Oklahoma is trying to ascend. LSU is reacting. Oklahoma is shaping. So this program, it didn't stumble into relevance. They built who they are. And Saturday, they get to defend that. Now, I'm going to give you a score prediction in the final segment, but here's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to give you a truth. That if Oklahoma plays their game, LSU will run out of answers. Because Oklahoma doesn't beat you with speed. They beat you with what they are going to do. You're not going to stop them when they do what they do. In a stadium that's probably going to be, hopefully going to be as loud as it's been all year long, the Tigers not just walking into Norman. They're walking into pressure. They're walking into an identity. They're walking into a team that controls what happens within that stadium. This is not a trap game for Oklahoma. This is not a toss-up game, but this is a checkpoint. And if the Sooners are standing there fully armed, LSU, they're going to want chaos. But Oklahoma lives in control. And on Saturday, I firmly believe control wins. I'll tell you why after this break. All right, so here we go. Let's finish strong. Let's finish with a truth. I think this is the biggest truth, the hardest truth of this episode. Not emotion, not optimism, not fandom. I do have all three of those, but just truth. And the truth is this: Oklahoma is positioned right now to win this game outright and win it comfortably. Not barely, not with drama, not with last-second tension, comfortably. I think the market agrees with this. I think film agrees with this. I think you look at the matchup across the board, it agrees with this. And I think, frankly, history agrees with this. The Sooners are favored by 10.5 points, all right? And that line doesn't exist because of hype. It exists because when you strip the emotion away, this is a structural mismatch for LSU. This is not just Oklahoma versus LSU. This is identity versus instability. And stability wins football games late in the season. So let's start where games actually get decided. Not the quarterbacks, not the headlines, not the brand names, but the line of scrimmage. LSU comes into this game with an offensive line that has been battling injuries all season. They're rotating pieces, they're reshuffling assignments, and now they walk into a defense that leads the SEC in sacks and tackles for loss. That's not pressure, that's collision. And here's the reality LSU doesn't want to face. Oklahoma's defense doesn't blitz wildly. They don't gamble for sacks. They win with discipline and leverage. And what that does is it makes pressure feel slower, but somehow heavier, which is exactly what breaks quarterbacks. LSU, well, they've moved to a backup quarterback. Michael Van Buren hasn't faced anything like what he's about to be thrown at him. He's going to see pressure from angles that he hasn't diagnosed. He's going to be forced into the decisions that he hasn't rehearsed, and he'll do it against a defense that's allowing just 14 points per game. That's good for 6th in the nation. In fact, that's not good. That's elite. And I think here's where this game is going to get ugly, okay? Oklahoma doesn't blow teams out early. What they do is they suffocate them late. They don't show dominance in the first 10 minutes. They take it in the last 20 minutes. And this is the type of game where you look up in the fourth quarter and you think, hey, we're only down by 7. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, how are we down by 20 now? Because once Oklahoma smells blood, they don't overextend. What they do is they tighten. No unnecessary risk, no emotional spiral, no reckless momentum plays, just execution. And LSU, they've kind of lived on borrowed time all season long. They've been a terrible bet this year for a reason, okay? You want to talk trends? Let's talk trends. LSU is 3-8 against the spread. That's not bad luck. That's not coincidence. That's a program routinely being overestimated by reputation more than reality. Oklahoma, 7-4 against the spread. Now, they don't play pretty, but they play honest football. They are undervalued. They're underrated. They're underestimated, which is exactly how dangerous teams operate in November. Now, there's a low total here. There's a low, and I think that's a part that really matters here. When you're looking at this game, the over-under is sitting around 36.5. That is incredibly low, but it tells us one thing, that Vegas expects defense to control this game. And in low total games, point spreads become harder to overcome unless one team owns the other side of the ball. And that's exactly what Oklahoma does. If Oklahoma jumps out to a 14-point lead, LSU won't have the firepower to respond to that. I don't believe this game is going to be a shootout. This isn't going to be one of those track meet style old Big 12 games. This is going to be a grind. And in grind games, elite defenses rule. So here's how, in my opinion, this game goes. All right, let me paint the picture here for you. First quarter, I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be messy. I think there's going to be a few missed opportunities. I think LSU tries to establish something. Oklahoma absorbs it. And by halftime, the Sooners begin to impose their control. Then the third quarter hits. Play action is going to get heavier. The defense is going to get faster. The quarterback is going to see less. The crowd stops just cheering, and they become a factor in the game. Fourth quarter arrives, and that's exactly when Missouri broke. That's exactly when Tennessee cracked. That's exactly when Alabama folded. And with the crowd noise, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. So this isn't about points. This is about separation. Oklahoma doesn't need to flash. They need consistency. LSU, they don't need brilliance. They need perfection. But guess what? Perfection cannot survive pressure. So I've got a prediction, okay? I don't predict emotion. I really try my best to predict patterns. And here's the pattern that I see. Oklahoma dominates field position. They force turnovers, and they wear LSU down. I've got the Sooners winning this by a final score of 27-13. A 2-touchdown win for those of you trying to do the math. That's a comfortable cover. You're 10.5, you're winning by 14. And I think that's the market being right on this game. I said it earlier. This is a game where LSU is trying to survive and Oklahoma trying to arrive. Survive teams play scared. Arrival teams play free. And Saturday, I think you're going to see the difference. Oklahoma isn't just more talented in this matchup. They're more grounded. They're more disciplined. They're more unified. They are more complete, which is why they don't just win this game. I believe they control it. They own it. They finish it. So this is not speculation. It's alignment, and everything lines up for this game to go Oklahoma's way. That's going to wrap it up for this edition previewing Oklahoma, Missouri, 2:30 kickoff on Saturday, ABC. Obviously, we'll be back afterwards to talk about it on Sunday. We hope you have a great weekend. Hope you've had an amazing Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time. Give us a like. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on the internet, heartland-sports.com. Like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're getting us. Thanks for being a part of the journey. Again, happy Thanksgiving and enjoy your weekend, everybody. We will see you.
I'm gonna be the man